launching from Kazakhstan in the Soyuz. But I can't know that we're once again launching Americans from the coast of Florida. And finally, here's a story I'd like to share with you. Back in 1981, John Young and Bob Crippen launched on Space Shuttle Columbia, the very first space shuttle flight, marking the last time we flew Americans on a brand new route. An American flag representing America's technical prowess. 30 years later, that same flag was flown to the International Space Station. This flag remains here today, waiting for Bob and Doug. Our flag means so many things to our country, and this small piece of America represents what we'll be able to achieve together. We'll never stop exploring. And so Bob and Doug can take this very special flag home to Earth, where it awaits its next. In a few years, the First Orion crew will take this flag with it around the moon. All of this starts today. I'll be watching outside the window, along with everyone else in America and around the world. I can't wait to look out the window and see my friends on close approach. Go Falcon 9, go Dragon, and go Bob and Doug. I'll see you soon.
And that was a very special message from NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy. Right now, the lone American aboard the International Space Station, so he will be ready and waiting to welcome Bob and Doug when they arrive tomorrow, if liftoff happens today, a little later tomorrow morning. The countdown now stands at T-minus 1 hour, 25 minutes, 54 seconds, and counting until launch. And we'd like to share with you just how much has happened here at Kennedy Space Center since the last time we had a crew on the pad launching from here. As you can imagine, the end of the shuttle era was a bittersweet moment for many people. But in the end, we knew we were striving for this day, and here we are. Joining us now is Kennedy Space Center's Deputy Director, Janet Petro, on the comeback we've seen across Florida's Space Coast. She's with Daryl Nail, now SB2. Daryl?
Yeah, thank you, Marie. Janet, you were just telling me you were there at the crew walkout. Tell me a little bit about what you saw between the astronauts and their families.
So it was very historic. It was very emotional. And Bob first came out of the doors. Of course, a cheer went up from everybody. The Vice President was there, Elon was there, the crew families was there, and of course myself and the rest of the center leadership was there to cheer them on. But then, when they came out and then they went to the families, and Bob Bankin said virtual hug, and he shouted out virtual hug in motion, and of course his child also did that virtual hug, and so I guess that addition of doing a virtual hug with the families. And then they then they walked and got in the Tesla. Either side, the family walked right up to the Tesla and were talking, having a private last moment with their father. Hand on the window. It was very emotional. I had tears in my eyes. I don't know how many other people had tears in their eyes, but it was really a special, emotional moment, and everybody was, of course, wishing them well. A lot of I love yous, a lot of Godspeeds, a lot of Ad Astra, take care, all of that. So it was very special.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And in the context of why it's so important, Janet, you remember, you've been here since 2007.
Yeah.
You were here in 2011 when Shuttle Atlantis came to wheel stop. I've talked to my uncle and father who worked out here. Layoff notices went out like the next day when the shuttle came to a stop. It was a very sad time. Bob Cabana, the director here, called it depressing. Tell me about that time and how far we've come.
Yeah, so as you know, it was the end of a very iconic program. A lot of people had spent their entire career working on the Space Shuttle program. So all of them launching from Launch Complex 39, many from 39A, where we're going to be launching from today, and then returning back. The iconic sonic booms was something that all along the Space Coast people really resonated with, really felt in their hearts and looked forward to. So it was a it will tell you that 30-year program, we had planned for it. The workforce was incredible. You know, there was a lot of people who, as I entire career here, and they wanted to safely fly that shuttle out, and then they retired. There was also another large group of people that just wanted to put on their resume that they had been privileged to work on the space shuttle. So the workforce I was incredibly proud of, because they were resilient, they were dedicated, safely flying out that shuttle. They didn't skip any steps, and regardless, as you said, that they knew they were getting their layoff notices. I think it landed on us on a Friday. They were in it till the end to make sure we safely flew it out. And of course, you know, we had 14,000 workers out here then, which we have a lot fewer here today. And of course, our guest operations, you remember those last shuttle flights, everybody around the country wanted to be a part of that experience. And we at the center really leaned forward to maximize how many could get both on site and never mind how many people were lined up at the beaches all along that last flight. And of course, today with COVID, unfortunately, we weren't able to have any on-site guest operations, which was pretty sad for this historic flight. But I'll bet that there's a ton of people watching from the beaches or from even their TV as we launch here today.
I'm sure there is, and tribute to your leadership and Bob Cabanas as well, getting things turned around here as a multi-user spaceport, getting the commercial entities in here. We appreciate all that you've done to make that happen. Janet Petro, appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Daryl.
All right, Marie, we'll toss it back to you.
All right, thanks, Daryl. And as NASA and SpaceX have worked for years to get to this moment, today's mission opens the door to an entirely new era in human spaceflight, not only for astronauts, but someday for the general public as well.
From the beginning, it has been our mission at SpaceX to help make a multiplanetary species. And today's mission is an important step towards the key to opening up space access for people like you and me is reusability. Without it, traveling to space is just far too expensive for the average person to do. Imagine how expensive a flight from LA to New York if you had to throw the plane away after a single trip.
A lot.
Yeah, exactly. That ticket would cost millions of dollars, and almost no one could ever afford to fly. Both the Dragon spacecraft and the Falcon 9 rocket are designed to be reusable, which not only improves the reliability of the vehicles in that they're flight proven again and again, but it also drives down cost. This is essential to enabling not just a handful of people, but rather hundreds of thousands of people to get out there and to explore the moon, Mars, beyond. And I, for one, it is my dream to visit Jupiter's ocean moon, Europa. Leland, you're one of the lucky Earthlings that's had the opportunity to get off the planet and go explore. Where would you like to go next?
You know, Lauren, I think I would like to go to Mars and, be there for, about a year each way and then a year on the Martian surface. But the one condition I would have to have, my pups have to go with me because it's about exploring new places, but taking your family with you. You know, we have these crewmates that are people that you get to know and love, over a course of training, but it's nothing like having your family with you. And I think that's something that we're going to be seeing in the future, people living and working on other planets as a family.
I think there are a lot of people who want to see your dogs with you in space.
Well, we've seen them in it. I know the dogs came in with you to take a picture in your spacesuit back in the day.
Yeah,
there it is.
Well, we kind of snuck them in, no dogs allowed at NASA.
Well, they had their moment.
They sure did.
And knowing that the opportunity to fly to space as a private citizen or a private dog maybe one day is right around the corner, we have a new poll question on Twitter for you. So if you were given the opportunity, would you travel to space? Let us know, and we'll share the results a little bit later.
All stations.
All right, well, there is not a lot of cargo.
Chief Engineer Technical Poll for launch escape arming and propellant lift.
All right, now while there's not a lot of cargo in today's mission, Dragon is carrying 2 special payloads, aside from Bob and Doug, of course. The first is a series of custom art pieces entitled Humankind by Los Angeles artist Tristan Eaton. These indestructible, double-sided paintings are made from gold, brass, and aluminum, and they celebrate how far humanity has come, as well as how far we still have to go. It includes a beautiful homage to the Saturn V rocket, as well as a nod to space. You can find more images and information about these pieces on SpaceX's social channels. Next, in the spirit of inspiring the next generation of explorers, we wanted to celebrate the class of 2020, garden all the way through graduate school. SpaceX and NASA invited students from around the world to submit their photo to fly on America's first human spaceflight in nearly a decade. Each graduate's photo was used to create a mosaic image of the planet Earth, which we printed and is being flown aboard Bob and Doug's flight on the Crew Dragon spacecraft. We received nearly 100,000 photos. So thank you and congratulations to all the world's graduates.
So proud of what we're doing today. And I think about regular people flying space on a SpaceX rocket one day. When I first went to space, my primary task of installing the Columbus laboratory would be my aha moment, but Lieutenant invited us over to the Russian segment to have a meal. She said, "You guys bring the rehydrated vegetables, we'll have the meat." And we're doing this, having this meal, and it's with African American, Asian American, French, German, Russian. The first female come 17,500 miles an hour, going around the planet every 90 minutes. And when I think of that perspective shift that I got, looking out the window, flying over my hometown, flying over Leo's hometown in Paris, flying over Yuri's hometown in Russia, it brought us all together as a civilization. And I think that's what spaceflight does for us. The more people that have the opportunity to go to space will feel like it's an inner working together for the good of humanity and all humankind.
Absolutely, and it's exactly what that piece of art was all about.
Yeah, and following today's mission, we will be one step closer to a future where we can all have that experience. We can all have that orbital perspective and the ability to explore new worlds. In just over an hour from now, Bob and Doug will be the first people to launch on an American vehicle in almost a decade. For the team at SpaceX, it's really hard to put into words how honored we feel about the trust that Bob, Doug, and NASA have put into our team to carry out this critical mission. I worked on Crew Dragon for 2 years, and I can just imagine what all of my friends and colleagues are thinking right now as they sit in anticipation and excitement for what's to come.
Absolutely. And speaking of those who have carried the hopes and dreams of science and exploration, we have a few shout outs to share with you from some big fans of NASA and SpaceX.
Wow, we're making history again. The NASA program. I am there with you guys in spirit. Bob, Doug, good luck. I know you'll be fine. I'll be watching and got everything crossed, arms, legs. I'm tied in a knot. Can't wait for you to get back safely.
This is the first time a U.S.-built rocket has taken people into space in 9 years. It's quite an accomplishment. So for us at the Planetary Society, more rockets means more exploration. More people in space means more exploration. More countries involved in the endeavor of spaceflight means more exploration. This is how we know the cosmos and our place within it. So in SpaceX, here's wishing your team and the crew especially a safe journey and the joy of discovery. Let's go.
And a big thanks to William Shatner and Bill Nye for those well wishes. And while we're keeping an eye on the pad, we want to bring in NASA astronaut Rex Walheim. He's a bell. It's because he flew 3 space shuttle missions to the International Space Station, including the final one by Atlantis, STS-135. He was one of the last 4 people to ascend the tower at Pad 39A and head to space. And he currently is Deputy Director of Safety and Mission Assurance at Johnson Space Center in Houston. Rex, thanks for joining us. You and Leland actually flew together.
Dog.
I really enjoyed flying with you. Hey, old dog.
Rex, you flew on the final shuttle mission, we said STS-135 with Doug, in fact. What's it like seeing him in Crew Dragon right now?
It's great. This is what we've been looking forward to. You know, after the end of the shuttle program, you know, it was a very important time we wanted to transition to this commercialization of space flight to allow these commercial companies to take our astronauts to and from the space station. So in the 9 years we've had since we last landed on Atlantis, we really worked hard for that. We were SpaceX partners and our Boeing partners, and here we are. Today's the day. We're taking that first step in this new era.
What do you remember most about launch day STS-135?
I think it was just you felt the weight of it. The Space Shuttle was a storied program, 130 flights, and thousands of people had poured their lives into this program to launch probes to the planets, the Space Telescope, and then, of course, to build the International Space Station. So you knew the incredible accomplishments of this program, and so you wanted to finish strong. And then when it finally became launch day, you'd finished the study, you'd worked really hard, and now it was time to kind of soak it in. And I think that's what Bob and Doug are doing right now. They're sitting on the vehicle, talking to each other, listening to the sounds, and feeling the vibrations as it starts up. And it's going to be a great experience for them.
Hi, Rex. What is your take on private astronauts going to space?
I think it's great. I think the more we can do to commercialize space, to make access easier, the better we are. And I think that's part of this whole program. You get the cost down, then more people can afford it. And you get the cost down, you can do more things in space, more science, more research. It is a transformative experience to fly in space, and I wish more people could see that. When you look out on the planet, like Liam was talking about earlier, with your crewmates from different countries all around the world, it gives you a different perspective. It gives you a perspective that we're all crewmates on this planet Earth. And we kind of get that now with the pandemic. We understand that we're all in this together. And that's what the space program does. And I want to see more people get a chance to see the Earth from that vantage point. And I think it'll bring us all closer together.
Hey, Rex, a very serious question here. The worm or the meatball?
Leland, I saw you dissing the worm earlier. How about the worm is awesome. I'm so glad to have the NASA worm insignia back. It's great.
Thank you very much, Rex. We appreciate you. And as we watch Bob and Doug there in the capsule, we are an hour, 10 minutes, 57 seconds and counting from launch, and we're going to send it over to Hawthorne for an update. Jesse?
Thanks, Marie. We're just an hour and 13 minutes away from launch, and things are really getting ready to pick up here. Since arriving at the spacecraft, Bob and Doug were helped by our closeout engineers to get into their seats, attach their suits to special umbilicals that provide rocks, and a communication link to Dragon systems. They conducted leak checks, which were successful, and communications checks with the Corps here in Hawthorne, which is the person who will speak to them directly throughout the entire mission, as well as the launch director in Florida. This is where they are checking their comm path through both ground stations and the tracking and data relay satellites that we'll use to talk to the crew the entire way to the station.
Right, and after those suit checks were complete, the closeout team was able to seal up the hatch, which also got its own leak check, and we confirmed that it was good to go. The closeout team at this point has already departed the area around the pad. They're about 25 minutes ahead of their schedule, and right now weather operators are kicking off their final check on wind speeds at the pad, which are going to be used, and they're really important for that final go, no-go for launch. Final go, no-go. Various teams at both NASA and SpaceX are going to do some internal go polls, just making sure conditions are good with Falcon 9, the Draco, and the space station before the final go is given. So let's check back in with Houston real quick for a status on the team there supporting the space station.
In Mission Control Houston, led by Flight Director Zev Scoville, has been pulled, and we're go for launch. All systems on board the station that are required to be healthy for the mission are reported good, and we're standing by. Station power and commands are looking healthy, life support systems and thermal conditions are normal, and the trajectory is right on track to ensure that Dragon's flight will meet right up with the orbiting complex as planned. Chris Cassidy aboard the International Space Station is finishing up some tasks, going into his able to watch the launch of Bob and Doug. Mission Control Houston will largely be in monitor mode for the first 18 hours of the flight, with the team here really jumping into the mix tomorrow when Dragon gets in range of the International Space Station and we begin operations. So I'll send it back. Everything's green on our board from the International Space Station. Go Falcon 9, go Dragon, and Godspeed to Bob and Doug.
All right, thank you, Gary. If you are just now joining us, you picked a really good time, because we are 1 hour, 8 minutes and counting away from launch. And this is our coverage for this mission known as Demonstration Mission 2 or Demo 2. Liftoff time still holding for 4:33 p.m. Eastern, tracking no issues with Falcon 9 or Dragon, and we're still waiting for that weather to hopefully cooperate. We're still tracking a few things like precipitation and flight through clouds. We're hoping clears within the next 20 minutes or so. Over the last 3 hours, our crew members, Doug Hurley and Bob Bankin, donned their SpaceX suits in the historic crew quarters suit up and made their way out to Launch Pad 39A. They walked out of the crew quarters building just as hot to fly from this spaceport has done since Apollo 7. They were transported to the pad where the crew now on board the Crew Dragon spacecraft, and we're continuing to get views of them inside that cabin live.
Today is a historic launch. It was the first time a commercially built spacecraft will launch people into orbit, and the first time since the U.S. has sent people to the space station from American soil since 2011 with the retirement of the Space Shuttle program. Over the next hour, we will conduct a series of polls to get ready for launch, have Bob and Doug arm the launch escape system, and begin fueling Falcon 9. Launch is set for 4:33 p.m. Eastern. This will include a 12-minute flight to orbit and then a 19-hour flight to dock with the International Space Station at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow.
Today's mission is the culmination of years of work between it at SpaceX and at NASA. Demo 2 is going to be an end-to-end flight test. We're going to start with launch today, go all the way to docking with the space station, and then when Bob and Doug come home, swing down in the Atlantic. And this is going to be the final test for NASA to certify SpaceX for regular crew flights to the space station.
And we've been hearing a little crew on board Dragon, which they are currently strapped into their seats, as you can see on your screen. They're already through their seats, or they've already been strapped into their seats and through communications and leak checks. To follow all the milestones still ahead on those displays, just above them, that you can see there.
Go ahead. Yeah, we're gonna pressures in the common manifolds just to raise them a little bit. So we will be momentarily cycling the tank isolation valves. Just wanted to take a pause to listen into the nets.
Okay, we appreciate that, Jay.
So they'll be getting insight into all of the Dragon and Falcon 9s as we proceed towards launch. At T-minus 1 hour and 7 minutes, let's check in with John Instrucker for a status update on both of those vehicles. What's the update, John?
Well, the good news is we've had a smooth one this afternoon. SpaceX team is working no technical issues on either the Falcon 9 or the Dragon spacecraft. For the Falcon 9, operators have completed, well, they are still in work. They're going to complete in a few minutes propulsion checkouts that are being done on both the first stages. The team will be assessing their launch readiness with a final go, no-go poll. That'll come at T-minus 45 minutes. It'll be followed by starting at T-minus 35 minutes. Now, earlier today, Dragon operators performed a series of checkouts of Dragon's flight systems. The spacecraft currently go for launch. Our NASA crew, astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Bankin, that you can see inside the Dragon capsule on the right-hand side of the display, are currently going through the various screens, simple checks. Their hatch is closed, suit leak checks are complete, count checks are good. The next major event for Dragon is going to be retract of the crew access arm that you can see on the left monitor up alongside the Dragon capsule. That's going to happen somewhere between 2 minutes before liftoff. Now, the big one right now is the range. The range is currently red for launch from historic pad 39A. Now, the air and the sea space is clear, and the worldwide network of ground stations, as well as the tracking and data relay satellites, they are ready to support Dragon. But the range is red for the weather. We recently did clear, we went green for lightning, but we are still violating several constraints. Rain, cumulus crowds, field mills, which is essentially until that the atmosphere is energized around the launch site. We are expecting that we'll possibly clear that. We're going to hear a weather briefing at 1 hour with the expectation that those conditions may clear shortly afterwards and allow us to move into propellant loading. Also, we've been releasing balloons. What we're seeing at the upper altitudes is conditions look good for Falcon 9 with Dragon. No concerns have been expressed by the GNC guidance team right now. Now, as a reminder, today we have an instantaneous launch window at 4:33:35 Eastern Daylight Saving Time, or just past 33 minutes after the upcoming hour. So we get one chance at it today. But currently, T-minus 1 hour and 3 minutes, just passing that. 9 Dragon, our go. The range is ready to support, but now we're where, as we've been expecting all afternoon.
Thanks, John. We've got an extensive history now of flying Falcon 9 from the Florida. Just last year, completed a test run of the mission that we're less than an hour from beginning here today.
The purpose of that mission was to demonstrate Dragon's capability to safely and reliably fly to and from the International Space Station. The success of Demo 1 was a really exciting moment, and it paved the way for today's mission, where we are just moments away, hopefully if we get that weather, from flying U.S. astronauts from U.S. soil for the first time since 2011.
Dragon years of operational experience are what we refer to as flight heritage. As I mentioned earlier, SpaceX has successfully completed 21 flights of Dragon to and from orbit since 2010, including 20 trips to the International Space. Not only have we conducted thousands of hours of testing, we've also enhanced and added features to Dragon.
Much of what was learned with the cargo Dragon was leveraged in the design of this vehicle.
Cycling is complete, expected behavior, and wanted to hear those.
We actually did, Jay. We were just making a comment about that. I heard some clicking and Bob wants it to display, so absolutely.
Copy out.
And that again right there, that's the crew talking to the core here in Hawthorne, California, who's going to be talking to them throughout their ascent uphill. So they were just doing a quick checkout. Bob and Doug confirmed they were able to hear it. Sounds like everything's still good. So with Falcon or Dragon. Back to what we were talking through as we're describing these systems, a lot of what SpaceX did with Cargo Dragon has been leveraged into this Crew Dragon. The vehicle is designed to be autonomous, which means it can basically fly itself, but it also features a full manual ability if the crew needs to take control in case of emergency.
Many of the other enhancements help towards SpaceX's goal of reusability and less refurbishment times. So let's take a closer look at some of these advancements.
Standing at almost 27 feet tall from bottom of the trunk to top, Crew Dragon's composed of two main elements. We have the capsule up top, which is designed to hold the crew and any pressurized cargo, and then an unpressurized trunk on the bottom.
And the nose cone at the top of the capsule protects the docking system as well as the guidance navigation control system, or what we call G. The cone opens for docking and remains attached to the Crew Dragon spacecraft, unlike the previous version of Dragon, and that helps towards our reusability
Dragon
efforts.
SpaceX, we are at T-minus 1 hour. We're go for section 6. When ready, we report go for launch.
Section 6 in work.
So the crew just has a couple checks, and when they are ready for launch, we're going to hear them report to the core that they are go for launch. Continuing to walk you through the Dragon space, opposite of that nose cone is the trunk. We can see it on the left-hand screen there, where it's kind of split right down the middle with the left side black and the right side white. The trunk provides an attachment point to Falcon 9, the Dragon capsule, and can carry any. On the outside, one half of the trunk contains a radiator that rejects heat from the active thermal control system into space using SpaceX's new Pica tiling technology. The other half contains solar cells that are used to charge the spacecraft's battery in flight.
SpaceX Dragon, Bob and I are go for launch.
And you heard that call out right
Copy,
there.
go for launch. Will be the go, no go forward, T-minus 45.
Bob and Doug are go for launch, and next up.
Step 6.5.
You're hearing it live from the Mets. This is amazing, very exciting. The SpaceX is the space designed to accommodate up to 7 crew members with modular seats that can be removed and replaced by additional cargo. The seats are made of carbon fiber and will be used for any crew members flying on board.
Control panel that's centered between the pilot and commander seats consists of 3 touchscreen displays, and that's the crew to operate the vehicle and fly it manually, but also look at all of their procedures, relative position over the Earth, the space station, any alarms, alerts, anything that they could do on Dragon is through those touchscreens.
And lastly, our Super Draco launch escape system is a key safety feature, giving the crew the ability to safely escape from the time of launch all the way to orbit.
That launch escape system was work a little bit earlier this year, again on that in-flight abort test. As we look to the future beyond this test flight, the first operational SpaceX crewed mission for NASA will be a little bit later this year after Bob and Doug come home. NASA astronauts Mike Hopkins, Victor Glover, and Shannon Walker, and Soichi Noguchi of the Japan Exploration Agency, or JAXA, were chosen to support this mission, being called Crew 1.
But today, Doug Hurley is the commander for this mission. He previously flew on 2 space shuttles.
We're monitoring the weather as they'll be briefed. We're also looking at a watch item on a hydraulics QD. Ring pressure will come up at minus 8 minutes 30 seconds, and we'll be able to verify decay rate. No concerns at this time. Everything's but watching that item. No other constraints on Falcon 9 or ground systems.
Stage 2 RP1 bleed is complete.
All right, we just crossed the 55-minute mark away from launch. Sitting right next to Doug Hurley, who's closest to your screen, is NASA astronaut Bob Bankin. He is the joint operation for Demo 2, and Bankin previously flew on 2 space shuttle missions, STS-123 and STS-130, and also served a tour as chief of the astronaut. So here's a little bit more about the man who said testing out a brand new spacecraft is an astronaut's dream.
When you go through the launch day preparations, there's a lot of moments that kind of stand out to you. One is the celebratory piece of it, which is that you're walking out of the suit up room and getting in the vehicle that's going to take you to the launch pad. When you close the hatch, that's really when Doug in the vehicle, and it's our vehicle, and we're really in control of the mission at that point.
Test pilots, their task proved that man could fly into orbit around the Earth and return live and well to talk about it.
There's always a balance of managing risk as you go forward to figuring out a way to, collect the data. We hear a sound. Okay, is that sound an expected sound? Or we see a light, is that light an expected light? Does it sync up with something else that's going on or not? So trying to dissect all of that in real time in your head is, a lot of things happen like that. Launching of a vehicle.
From St. Anne, Missouri, he is an Air Force colonel and flight test engineer. He flew aboard Space Shuttle Endeavour, introducing NASA astronaut Bob Bankin.
My career has kind of spanned a couple of decades at this point. I arrived with the class of 2000, went through the training program, primarily focused on the space shuttle and the space station, learning those systems. Having launched a couple times on vehicles, the second time was definitely different than the first time. Risk and had it be in front of her, and I've done that to her. There's just something different rocket launch when there are people on board. You feel a little bit differently about the pit of your stomach, and I can only tell you it's multiplied significantly when it's somebody that and then somebody, of course, that's a family member. It's even multiplied more.
For me personally, as a spouse, watching everything that Bob has put into this over the last 5 years, the dedication that he's shown, the perseverance is pretty special for both of us, though. The way our minds work, be until sort of the mission is complete, that you have really a chance to savor it and celebrate it. This is a huge accomplishment for an Air Force flight test engineer to be part of the demonstration mission of a brand new vehicle. It's going to be amazing.
Without a partner that has that same appreciation, I think it can be challenging for some folks. There's a lot of work and a lot of time that takes away from family that that my spouse appreciates, and I love her for that. Really, my role on the Demo 2 mission is to make sure that we get this vehicle tested and evaluated so that we can move on to more operational missions at the International Space Station. We've got a lot of objectives on board the vehicle that we need to accomplish to really make sure that it's good to go. We'll make sure all those systems are working during the test flight so that the future missions will have them available even if they don't plan to utilize them. Through years of the NASA team, I'm helping to share that experience and teaching them the lessons that we've learned by going through this. Now there's another capability in the U.S. besides NASA, something of this magnitude. when is the last time humans launched on a new vehicle? Certainly on the American side, it's now we're at a time when we've got multiple vehicles under development. It's a great time from a space exploration to see all that happening, and it's because of this nurturing of the environment, being able to pull in a wider group of people who can contribute towards human spaceflight. It's a super cool time. On a deeply personal level, I'm really excited that my son is get a chance to see me launch into space. Being in a little bit of an abstraction thing for him because he's seen me do it in old videos, but he hasn't seen me do it for real. And so I'm excited for him to see this launch. I want to thank the entire Commercial Crew Program team that's worked together to get to this point where we've got vehicles in the launch pad ready to head to the International Space Station.
We're just over 49 and a half minutes away from launch of the Falcon 9 carrying Dragon to the space station. Right now, the launch director and the launch team are preparing for a readiness for launch poll. In this poll, the 13 members of the launch electronically indicate a go for launch. This is also the go for propellant load. Now, we're going to hear that in a couple of minutes, so while we wait, we are tracking you watching from all over the country. We're seeing large numbers of you logging on or tuning in from coast to coast, as well as around the world. We want to know, is your first time watching a launch live? If not, how many have you seen before? Tell us using the hashtag LaunchAmerica from your favorite social media website. As for me, this isn't my first one. I've seen a lot, but everyone is exciting. Now, coming up, we're going to do a readiness poll, as I mentioned. Currently, right now, on other nets, the SpaceX launch director is checking to verify the Dragon team is ready and that the NASA launch management team is ready. They'll come back at about T-minus 47 minutes with instructions to the SpaceX team to make their final assessments. Then they log into the procedure. It's a little different than the old days where you hear a go, 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 position by position, all up and down the row. In this electronic age, everybody just clicks on whether they're go or no go. The launch director will then, at T-minus 45 minutes, summarize the end of the poll and will then provide instructions for the team. At the same time, we will begin getting ready for the crew action, and we'll show you that on one of the screens that we've got up. Now, currently, we are continuing to monitor the weather. The weather is still red. It is improving. We're looking at one cell between the radar. We're keeping our fingers crossed that conditions will improve, but we're going to be watching that for about another 15 minutes. So it looks like we're going to be good to begin propellant load once we hear the polls, but we still have to get the get the range green so that we can actually do the launch in just 47 minutes from now. Let's listen to Countdown Net for a moment. Right now, coming up on 46 minutes, 10 seconds before launch. Didn't hear any significant chatter coming over Countdown.
Instructor to Countdown Net. Poll is complete, and we have a go to proceed with propellant load. Launch control, proceed with swing and crew. Arming crew arm movement for T-minus 45 minutes. Thank you, launch control. A reminder in control room on hold and launch escape protocol. For non-urgent no-go conditions, brief CE or LD, and it will approve aborting the launch auto sequence and proceed to launch abort. For urgent issues affecting the safety of the operation, operators shall call hold on the Countdown Net. Launch control will abort the launch auto sequence immediately and proceed into the launch abort auto sequence. Operators shall also advise the launch director whether structural breakup or fire is imminent or occurring per Dragon manual escape flight rules. Remainder on fire alarm instructions. Here in Fire Room 4, in the event of a fire alarm, key operators, previously briefed, will remain at their post while the alarm is evaluated. In the event that personal safety is threatened, we will evacuate to the south-facing emergency exit, which leads directly outside. One final reminder, we'll be arming the launch escape system. All personnel, please stay in your seats from now through orbit insertion and Dragon separation from the second stage.
Crew access arm retract has started.
And you've heard Mike Taylor, the SpaceX launch director, give instructions to the team. We've also just heard the call. The crew access arm retraction is underway. Great view from the camera inside the White Room as we see the arm moving away from the Dragon capsule, one of the major events necessary to get down to T0. The next one coming up of the escape system on the Dragon capsule. Now, right now, the next plan for Falcon 9, T-minus 35 minutes, we will begin loading propellant onto the first stages. Now, currently, Falcon 9's looking good, Dragon's looking good. The range continues to be go for launch in terms of the clearance around the launch pad, both the air and the sea space, the flight corridor, the ground stations, the NASA tracking and data relay satellites are ready to support, and we just continue to monitor the weather. Our team is getting constant updates. We're monitoring weather data sensors around the launch site, looking to make sure get everything into the green position. The one that we're mostly looking at right now is how much rain we're going to get between now and liftoff. It's just going to be mild precipitation that's within the rules for loading propellant. That's what the expectation is, but we're going to continue to watch that. So fingers crossed, but right now coming up at T-minus 43 minutes, 18 seconds and counting, everything but the weather's go, and the weather is in the right direction. So we've got our fingers crossed here. At this time, we're going to send it back over to Kennedy Space Center as the action is picking up on the launch pad.
Thanks, John. Now that countdown clock is continuing to tick, and we are 42 minutes and 46 seconds away from launch. As you just saw, arm retracted, that is the last major visual milestone before liftoff. And we should be hearing out on the net soon confirmation that the launch escape system is armed. When that happens, all 8 of the Super Draco throttle valves are opened, which means that those engines can ignite.
For section 7.
Okay. So that means those 8 throttle valves are opened, and if those Super Draco are in order for a Dragon to escape off of the pad, they could.
And so things running just a little bit ahead of schedule right now.
Fuel bleed is complete.
Now, we just saw the crew access arm retract just a minute ago. We saw NASA astronauts Doug Hurley.
In 7.2, our visors are closed and we're escape system.
So we just heard the astronauts confirm that they are about to arm the launch escape system. That happens just before fueling begins, which we expect to happen in just a couple of minutes. We saw Bob and Doug suit up a little over 3 hours ago. Then we watched them drive out to Launch Complex 39A. They were assisted by the SpaceX ground team with Crew Dragon ingress. That happened a little before 2 o'clock this afternoon. And then we saw the spacecraft hatch close. And again, just a minute ago, we saw the crew access arm retract. We just heard that the crew armed the launch escape system. And in just a few minutes, we are going to hear the call that they have started propellant loading.
Launch escape system is verified armed.
So we just heard that verification that the launch escape system is armed.
We're switching to GN2.
And we are going to Seth Thorne to take us through prop loading. Jesse?
From the parachutes to the launch escape system, SpaceX has designed Crew Dragon and Falcon 9 to be the safest launch vehicle ever flown. And joining us today, we have SpaceX's Nick, our mission manager for our in-flight abort mission earlier this year, and currently works on the Starlink team. Thanks for joining us, Nick.
Here at the Launch and Landing Recovery Center with the recovery team and our Dragon ground operations team monitoring the launch.
Awesome. Can you tell us more about the safety features on this new version of Dragon?
Sure. So Dragon 2 was designed with long-term reuse and reliability in mind. So multiple layers of redundancy to any of the failure modes that we could conceive of, that NASA could conceive of when we were working to design and test this vehicle over the past few years. Putting it under an unforeseen failure mode or multiple failures which push us outside of our design space, Dragon also has backup systems and operational controls intended to keep Bob and Doug safe. I'm sure you've heard a lot about it today, but the launch escape system is the primary backup system that we have from the moment that the vehicle is here on pad being fueled all the way up until orbital insertion. At a high level, the launch escape system, in the event of a major Falcon anomaly or emergency, will terminate Falcon, separate Dragon from Falcon, and it'll use Dragon's 8 Super Draco engines to quickly pull the vehicle away from any kind of Falcon anomaly.
About the launch escape system, how exactly is that activated? Is it autonomous? Is it manually activated?
Definitely. So for this system to work as designed, you have to remember that the vehicle could be flying at hundreds or thousands of miles an hour through the lower atmosphere. So it's really important that it's extremely fast and with a very low chance of false positives. The launch escape system fundamentally is set to look at a set of pre-programmed criteria which are on board the vehicle. Dragon and Falcon high rate telemetry, looking for abnormal vehicle dynamics, loss of communication between critical systems, or manual commanding. Our launch director and chief engineer, who you've heard a lot from today, are capable of sending a manual command to Dragon to initiate a launch escape. And Bob and Doug are also always able to actuate the launch escape handle and initiate a launch escape themselves as well. Now that the system is armed, all of this is currently active on the vehicle.
Wow, a lot that goes into it. And we did have an in-flight abort test earlier this year to test this out. Can you tell us what we learned from that test?
Definitely. It was possibly the most flight-like test of an orbital class booster in history. It was a fully flight-like test using a full Falcon 9 rocket, which we had to deploy in order to get this fully integrated system. For folks who didn't get a chance to see it, the vehicle followed a normal crew launch trajectory. About a minute and a half into flight, we had Dragon autonomously trigger the launch escape system based on a reconfiguration of those triggers I was just talking about. And thankfully, we had we continued through flight, had a successful parachute deployment and splashdown, and we did see spectacularly blow up about 10 seconds after separation. It's important to recognize that all of that happens from command to action of the vehicle in under half a second.
Wow, yeah, that sounds amazing. Thank you so much, Nick, for joining us and talking through those details with us today. So we're going to send it back to KSC with Lauren.
Thank you, Jesse. We are about a minute and a half of propellant load. At T-minus 35 minutes, we should hear the call out on the nets that propellant load has started. So that's about a minute and 13 seconds away.
Hey, Marie and Lauren, I am getting goosebumps. This is an exciting moment. When I was sitting in the vehicle, when we retracted everything, when all the prop was getting loaded up, I was just going through my crew notebook. I was thinking about, what my first step would be if there was a malfunction, because usually everything goes nominally when you fly to space, but think about the things that you have to take care of, the first steps you have to take care of. And on my mission, I was calling out the abort calls, like if we had lost an engine, where would we go next, when the different abort calls around the country and around the world. So I think that's what those guys are probably thinking about now, and just really getting ready for this mission to go off.
Absolutely, and we're just now about 20 seconds from when we talent loading to start. Again, that's fueling of the rocket.
All right, we're getting close. We should hear that call out any minute now on the nets. So let's listen in.
propellant load has started.
Fantastic. So prop load has started. We've started loading liquid oxygen stage 1 and stage 2. And yeah, liquid oxygen and RP1 are rocket grade kerosene. So now that we are 34 minutes and 42 seconds away from the first launch of astronauts into orbit from American soil since 2011, we know that the launch escape system is armed just before fueling. Dragon prop load happened weeks ago, actually just a few miles down the road, called Dragonland. And those propellants, which are MMH or monomethylhydrazine, that's our fuel, and NTO or nitrogen tetroxide, that's our oxidizer, those not only feed the Draco engines that propel Dragon on orbit, but they also supply those 8 Super Draco engines of the launch escape system. So I have one, a little model. Oh, it doesn't come off the stand.
Don't break it, Lauren.
All right, it's very nice. The Dragon is actually broken up into 4 quads, and each quad has 2 of the Super Draco engines for a total of 8 of them. And as I mentioned, they are biprop engines. They have MMH and NTO as their oxidizer. Now, most abort systems from past space vehicles, I believe like Soyuz, Mercury, Apollo, they all had a pointy escape tower on top where there was a rocket engine or a series of rocket engines on top. And if they weren't used, that escape tower would have to jettison itself from the vehicle. If it was used, it would be used to lift the vehicle off of the rocket. Well, Dragon is a little bit different. It's actually integrated into the vehicle, and that's great for a couple of reasons. One less thing you have to jettison on a nominal flight, and so they're pretty dormant, just those throttle valves open unless they're used, and hopefully they never have to be. And yeah, I mean, the other thing that offers you is the ability to escape from the pad all the way to orbit. Because if you jettisoned your escape system prior to that, you couldn't. So yeah. That's a little Dragon there.
Again, right. New era, much safer design.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for walking us through that, Lauren. Again, the launch escape system is armed. That protects Bob and Doug so that if something were to go wrong, they can shoot off of the rocket and parachute to safety in the ocean. That is such a crucial safety capability. And so now we want to go over to Hawthorne for an operational update with John.
Thanks, Marie. We are counting down those final minutes. Everything is still looking good on the Falcon 9 and the Dragon vehicles for an on-time launch, but weather is trending the wrong way right now. We're keeping our ear in case we hear that the weather is going to be no-go for the rest of the count. Right now, we are counting down at T-minus 32 minutes.
Stage 1 locks and
Falcon 9 did
fluorides
begin
are normal.
propellant load at T-minus 35 minutes, right on time. The propellants we use on Falcon 9 are a fuel, which is rocket-grade kerosene, also called RP1, refined petroleum. We use an oxidizer, and that's the super chill liquid oxygen, or LOX as we call it. Those 2 propellants with together, but they don't leak, so we need an ignition source to complete the fire triangle. For this, Falcon 9 uses a fluid called T-tub. You might see that just before first stage ignition, or maybe later in the second stage ignition. You get a green colored flame as the T-tub comes out into the oxygen, and that ignites the main engine before the rocket takes off or the second stage engine lights. Now currently in the fueling, RP1 fuel is about 10% full on the first stage. That's the bottom 2/3 of the stack of the vehicle you can see on the left. The first stage is that long white cylinder at the bottom, plus that black cylinder called the inner stage. That's the entire first stage that we're loading with LOX and RP1 kerosene. That's the part that comes back to Earth. The second stage just above it, the white cylinder, and then above that will be the Dragon trunk and the capsule. Now currently, the second stage is also loading fuel with RP1. That's about full right now. We are loading liquid oxygen on the first stage. The second stage liquid oxygen load will begin at T-minus 16.5 minutes if the weather cooperates. So LOX loading will then continue on both the first and the second stage until the last few minutes of the countdown. Helium loading is also underway into pressure vessels on the second stage. We use that to pressurize the tanks in flight as the propellant is being pulled out by the Merlin turbopumps. Dragon on board the spacecraft. You can see the astronauts are monitoring systems while propellant is loaded into the Falcon 9.
Stage 1 cryo helium load
The
has
first
started.
demo flight last year, and then the in-flight escape test earlier this year. The sounds inside the Dragon capsule were recorded. So as part of the training, the sounds of the propellant loading were played back to acclimate the crew to what they're experiencing now. I'm listening to some discussion on one of the back nets, trying to track where we are with the weather. We're just passing another weather gate right now, trying to see whether or not the conditions are go. In certain situations, when the weather is no-go, you have to wait 30 minutes, and we are now inside of 30 minutes. But if the cloud moves away, if the conditions improve, we may be able to continue the countdown for another 14 minutes and reassess. So we're waiting to see whether or not we can continue the count. Currently, we are. The range, they're ready to support with no problems in the air and the sea space area. But again, the weather, that's the one that's looking bad, and we're going to continue to listen. Today, we have an instantaneous launch time. So at this point, if we hear a hold for any reason, we're going to have to stand down and target our backup launch opportunity on May 30th.
For Demo 2, Bob and Doug's flight to station will take about 19 hours, and their journey is fairly similar to back and forth to the International Space Station, with two noticeable differences: docking and splashdown.
As we await T-0 in just a little over 28 minutes from now, ground operations team's just doing those final series of checks, making sure both Dragon and Falcon 9 are ready for liftoff, and really keeping an eye on that weather. And you're just continuing to get live views of the teams. You've got Falcon 9 and Dragon on your left, and then Bob and Doug on the right as they prepare at...
Once we hit T0 and a successful launch occurs, we will watch Falcon 9 and Dragon make their ascent until Falcon 9 and first and second stages separate and send Dragon on its way to the space station.
And once it gets on orbit, mission operators will prepare Dragon for on-orbit operations, where Dragon will execute a series of burns that are going to gradually raise it to align more closely with the International Space Station. And you're seeing some of that track in the animation on your screen right now. After doing enough of those burns, they'll flip Dragon. Oh, sounds like we're going to get a weather update real quick for the crew.
Go ahead, SpaceX.
Yeah, we're currently just evaluating a constraint on the field mill rule, which looks at lightning energy dissipation. We expect to have an update at about T-20 and more information there on whether we would be able to continue into the prop load or scrub at that time.
Okay, Jay, thanks for the update. We appreciate it.
Copy. So I'll give you some more words in about 6 minutes.
Okay, so it sounds like we're going to find out in about 6 minutes if we're going to have enough time. And John, I was referring to a couple of those weather situations where we have to have a certain amount of time. In this case, with the field mills, about 15 minutes. So they have until about 16 minutes and 30 seconds to really make sure that we're going to have enough time for that to dissipate. So we're going to be listening for that weather update in just a couple of minutes, but it is going to be a pretty interesting trip uphill for them once they actually get on orbit.
And a very exciting countdown with 6 minutes to figure out if we are launching today. But targeting back to what we were talking about, next, Dragon will make its approach and actually dock with the space station. This is a big scene with Dragon cargo deliveries in the past, which used a process called berthing. Now, berthing requires the spacecraft to approach the station and then stop, maneuver the station's robotic arm to capture the spacecraft. Docking on this version of Dragon can be done autonomously.
Stage 2 cryo healing load started.
Autonomously with no crew aboard the station. It's typically a faster process, both when arriving and leaving, but it does still require pinpoint accuracy to approach safely.
Once captured, a spacecraft then gets attached to a common berthing mechanism. It's the same type of port that we use to connect each of the modules together on board station. It's a little bit slower process than docking, but the hatches are significantly larger than docking ports, which makes them perfect for bringing up large cargo items.
Dragon will spend up to 120 days docked before preparing to return home. Following successful completion of Dragon's objectives and cargo loading operations, the crew will close out the cabin, perform final system checks, and configure the vehicle for undocking. Once the automated undocking is complete, Dragon will complete 2 departure burns using its Draco engines, pushing it away.
And then after Dragon departs the station, it's ready for its trip home. And and that'll have deorbit entry and landing and a number of other operations. If you're looking at this animation, it might look like we're playing the one we played originally in reverse, kind of how it goes, but just a little bit quicker. All of the operations following the final departure maneuver will include things like trunk separation, closing that nose cone again, executing a deorbit burn, and once they're inside the atmosphere, deploying drogue and then main parachutes, and then finally splashing down off the Florida coast, at which teams will move in, get Bob and Doug up out of the water, and get them out of the capsule once they're on the boat. So we have 4 minutes now until we get that next expected weather update. Let's go down now to the team at Kennedy. Marie?
Right, thanks, Dan. If you're just joining us, we are now T-minus 23 minutes and 48 seconds from the first launch of astronauts to the International Space Station from U.S. soil in 9 years. We're going to find out in less than 4 minutes if the weather looks good for that. And this will mark the beginning of a new era where more people will be able to fly than ever before. In fact, we took a poll a little bit earlier to ask you if you had the opportunity to fly to space, would you go? And 86% of those of you watching answered that you would go to space.
That's an incredible number. I think, realizing that you don't have to be a military astronaut or a NASA astronaut to fly in space. You can be a regular civilian, just a regular person going up to space on a SpaceX type rocket. So I think that's why the numbers are so high.
Yeah, and we are really thrilled to see all the folks watching along online. I know we certainly hope that that this is a go, but we're going to hear a little bit of a weather update in less than 3 minutes now. And Leland, I know they're waiting for a weather update, and they've come, almost all the way down the count. What do you think Bob and Doug are thinking about right now?
We on SES 129, we were having some weather problems, and I think we were getting close to the countdown. And then it seemed like the sky just cleared up right above our heads. We saw it and we knew where we were going. And, we always know that, you can have any types of delays, fuel, prop delays, all kinds of things that can happen. But we've trained over and over and over again for these types of scenarios. And so, we want to be safe. We want to be safe for our families. And we'll, do this another day if it doesn't work with the weather.
I love that John I always says weather. It's that thing that everybody talks about, but no one can do anything about it.
I know.
And it is this interesting thing of just, succumbing to Mother Earth. She's going to tell us if we can go or not today.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, if it happens, look at it this way. Bob and Doug got one really great rehearsal in, right?
It's all just a practice, yes.
So again, we're less than 2 minutes now from that weather update that is going to go directly to Bob and Doug, and we will quiet down so we can listen in for that, because I know we can't wait to find out what that is. And those of you watching that have been following along, we are eagerly awaiting to hear whether the weather is going to be a showstopper today.
These clouds can seem really deceiving at times, right? You see the blue skies peeking through and you think everything's fine, but you just don't know. That's why we have those launch weather officers.
Absolutely. And I know, we've talked about it's not just the weather in Florida that they're looking at. They've got to look at weather downrange. If they were to have an abort in flight and they needed to come down somewhere in the ocean, they need to consider what the weather's like out there, because recovery teams have to go out and get them in a situation like that. So there's so many, and that's why not just with this flight, but with every human space flight we've had in the past, there's always a very good chance of a scrub, because you do have so much criteria that you have to meet. And we're going to listen in now. We're just seconds away from a weather update.
Stage 2, RP1 load complete.
That is liquid oxygen venting off the rocket. That's completely normal and expected. We're standing by for a weather update.
Unless you can give us another 10 minutes, I don't think we're going to get there with any of the rules today.
I'm going to give you 10 minutes.
Another 10 minutes past T0, 1640. 16:45 local, I think we'll probably be clear on all the rules, but not quite going to make it for this.
Okay. We're going to check back in with you in about 2 minutes, and then I'll call it up at about 17 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, there's some of them are starting to count down, but we still have 2,000. So if that gets below,
And that didn't sound great right there. That was the weather net going out, but we're still standing by for a final decision. And we're going to continue to listen in for an update, but in the meantime, we're going to go over to John Insprucker at SpaceX headquarters. John?
And Dragon SpaceX on weather. We're still
T-minus 18 minutes and counting.
LD is
we are still red on weather.
Expect an update from LD.
We're waiting in about another minute for one final check with weather. We're going to check at T-minus 17 minutes possibly. We don't really expect that things will have improved. The weather officer was not optimistic that the weather would clear up that rapidly. We did hear the launch Taylor joke that, you know, if we could move 10 more minutes past the T0, weather conditions may improve, but Mike was not able to do that. We have an instantaneous window today. So at 17 minutes, we want to make that call because shortly after that, we will begin loading liquid oxygen on stage. So if we're not going to have the opportunity to launch, if the clock's going to run out, stand by.
Continue to violate a couple different weather rules that we now do not expect to clear in time to allow for a launch today. We go ahead and end today's launch attempt. Launch control. Go ahead and end the launch auto proceed into the launch abort auto sequence, please. Launch abort has started.
And Dragon SpaceX, we are not going to launch today. You are go for 5.100 launch scrub.
5.100. It was a good effort by the teams, and we understand, and we'll meet you.
Copy all.
We've heard the call from the crew. They have been informed. Launch Director Mike Taylor has called a scrub for the day, and we got the feedback when the Dragon team informed Bob and Doug. They said we gave it a good try, but they understand, and we are here to try another day. So right now we did officially hold the clock. It looks like a T-minus 16 minutes, 54 seconds. Launch automatic sequence that controls the Falcon 9, the loading of propellants, the cycling of valves. That is also stopped. We now proceed into what is a normal scrub sequence for us. We practice this every launch. So now we move into safely taking the propellants, the pressurization gases back off the first and second stages. As things get into a safe configuration, arm the escape system on Dragon, and we'll bring the crew access arm back around the spacecraft. So right now, we got down to just inside 17 minutes. The hardware was working very well on both Dragon and Spacecraft. We had the fuel loading going on. We had liquid oxygen loading going on, everything but second stage. And the weather just needed a little bit more time to clear the conditions. We didn't have that time because we had an instantaneous window. And so with that, this launch director had to call upon the input from weather, had to call a scrub per the safety rules that we have for this flight. So right now the team is undergoing the post-scrub operations on both Dragon as well as Falcon 9, working with the range. No issues being reported right now as we start to go through that sequence. Everything looks good. And Dan, we had a good webcast going here until the very end. So, you know, we'll look at a great dry rehearsal Last Saturday we did a dry one, I should say, and today we've done a wet dress rehearsal. But sorry, we just couldn't get there, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, John and obviously we can't control the weather. We came right down to the wire there, hoping we could just squeeze in between those cloud systems to get a launch today, but it wasn't to be. But it doesn't mean we're done. We're going to have another attempt coming up in just 3 days, so we're going to be doing this all over again essentially on Saturday, on the 30th, and that launch attempt is going to be coming at 3:22 p.m. Eastern Day. It's going to look largely the same to everything that we saw today, with the crew waking up, going through suit up, making their way to the pad. So we're going to feel a lot of deja vu, I think, on Saturday.
Yep. But still exciting. Safety is always first, so if weather was not there for us today, hopefully Saturday it will be there for us and we will have a safe launch on Saturday.
Yeah, the initial weather report still had us at about, I think, a 40% possibility of violation. So weather a little bit better, but we're still going to be kind of rolling the dice. It is Florida in the spring and summer, so storms are always a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
One of the good things, though, the vehicle appeared to be in great health throughout the day, both Dragon and Falcon 9, so we didn't have to scrub for any technical issue. We're going to continue and follow along with Bob and Doug until they're out of that capsule, as again, they had started loading fuel onto the Falcon 9 rocket, so they'll have to wait until all that fuel comes off. They'll disarm the launch escape system, which still stays armed because they're still sitting on a parked rocket, and then once they're able to disarm that launch escape system, the crew arm will swing back out. They'll make their way once again back the way they came, and then it'll be back orders for Bob and Doug for a few more days. But if you're just now tuning in, wondering why we're not still counting down, we did have a launch today. We were just a little under 17 minutes.
Fuel flow rates are nominal for offload, expecting about a 40-minute offload time.
So that call out the LOX, the liquid oxygen fuel pumping out of the first stage of the Falcon 9, everything looking good with that, expecting about 40 minutes for all that fuel to come off. So again, once that fuel comes off, Bob and Doug will be able to disarm the launch escape system, and that crew access arm will swing back out. They'll be able to make their way back down and then over to crew quarters. So unfortunate scrub today because of weather. That was the one thing we were tracking from the moment we started today, watching Bob and Doug get suited up for their launch. We did abort today's launch, or scrub today's launch, with a little under 17 minutes to go until our T0 time, which was 4:33. So that's going to move us to our next attempt, and that time is going to be 3:22 p.m. Eastern time, so a little bit earlier in the day for Bob and Doug and for everybody else watching around the world. They're still going to have a 19-hour flight to station if that's when we launch, and a lot of the stuff that we saw today is going to look very similar, but we're just going to try again, cross our fingers, hope for a little bit better weather the next time.
And again, this goes with every launch. We do track everything all the way down to T0 to make sure that everything is go, making sure that the range is go, weather is go. So this is standard procedure. We always tend to make sure that we have a backup day, launch day, in case we do have scrubs like today.
Better weather.
So this is pretty normal and standard. Nothing to be worried about. Again, we do this for of our vehicles, as well as today we had astronauts on our vehicle. So even bigger reason for us to make sure that we have